Hello, and welcome back to Parley. This prompt was written by PistilWhip. Hope you'll enjoy listening. It's about, well, the eternal hourglass of existence, of course. PistilWhip begins, The greatest weight. What if, some day or night, a demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say to you, quote, This life, as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it, but every pain or in every joy and every thought and sigh and everything unutterably small or great in your life will have to return to you, all in the same succession and sequence. Even this spider and this moonlight between the trees, and even this moment and I myself. The eternal hourglass of existence is turned upside down again and again, and you with it, speck of dust. End quote. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or how well disposed would you have to become to yourself and to life, to crave nothing more fervently than this ultimate eternal confirmation and seal? From Friedrich Nietzsche, The Gay Science with a Prelude in Rhymes and an Appendix of Songs. That's the whole prompt. So basically what we have here is a situation where a metaphysical demon appears to us and reveals that our life is going to be a sort of endless samsara, if you will, a cycle of repeating itself, but without the Buddhist mechanic of it being about refining of a sort. Instead, life just as it was will repeat exactly the same way forever. This is a great kind of prompt in a way because it raises a lot of simple questions, Sphinx's riddle-like questions, but also a lot of metaphysical concerns. And I suppose the fun is to see how each individual will react or kind of tune their thinking to this situation. As a brief aside, not only do I just enjoy this kind of prompt, it's like a good mix of open-ended but still sufficiently specific, which PistilWhip, I had complimented you on previously. I think you're quite good at this in Parley prompts, if I may. I've also found in my personal life that this is a pretty good type of question to ask people who you want to make philosophical conversation with. I found that because it is involving and yet there are kind of low stakes, and it's kind of so not open-ended but ridiculous and unnecessary to do the philosophy enough, and you could just react for whatever reason that I sort of understand but mostly don't. I have found that you often get pretty interesting responses from people on average, many kinds of people from this kind of question. Though if I were to guess, I would probably not word it like this for most people. I think there's some things I sort of like about this presentation that we'll get into, but for a lot of people, I would say it more plainly. And I will say it more plainly now. Basically, what we're to discuss is how you might react. That's what Nietzsche seems to be asking. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Would you not be upset to find out that you're going to repeat your life over and over? Or how, he says, well disposed would you have to become to yourself and to life? How positive would you have to be? Not exactly. To crave nothing more fervently than this ultimate eternal confirmation and seal. What would it take to be happy to hear this? And there's a real question there. I mean, what do we think about the idea that we're now going to repeat life over and over again? There are some reactions I would have if this happened to me in real life that I do not feel like are in the spirit of the main discussion point of this parlay. So I will briefly get a few of those out of the way now. For example, I guess things beyond the physical exist. Cool. Hey, hello, demon. Stay a while, chat, why don't you? We apparently have nothing but time. There's also the idea that being told this reveals that alternative states of metaphysicality, I guess, don't exist. So apparently I won't be facing an endless void when I die, although my individual experience will be the same, I think. We'll get back to that later. And I guess I'm not going to do something like reincarnate and have different experiences, whether I would know about them or not. That's kind of the key thing here, actually, but, go figure. It's been revealed to me the truth, I guess, of reality or the nature of my existence. I no longer wonder what will happen when I die. I think that this has implications beyond what actually happens after you die. Simply knowing that does kind of change life a little bit, don't you think? You kind of go about your daily activities in a way, whether you think it's positive or negative, with it in mind, no longer a mystery, what will happen afterward. And yes, for this parlay, I'm going to hand wave whether we believe the demon. You know, we're going to assume that for some reason we know that it is true, I guess. I'm not sure how that's kind of impossible, but let's just, yeah, I accept it as true that this is going to happen. We're going to talk about the philosophical idea. We're not going to say, well, I would quiz the demon to try to figure out if it was true. I might actually do that if this happened to be in real life, but let's talk about the implications if this were to be this state of affairs, not like just if a demon appeared in my bedroom. I mean, you know, and why not? Take me out to dinner first, you know. So with those things aside, what are we to do? Now, I was saying before this idea that simply knowing what is going to happen after your life may change your behavior. And I do mean in the sense that you might live your life differently, knowing that it will repeat itself many times, but we will get to that later. I also, though, meant the idea that there's a kind of weight lifted in some way. For example, some people believe that there is a metaphysical reason, a reason beyond the apparent physical world around us, why they need to behave in a certain way, or they will receive some reward or punishment when they die. Obviously, I don't mean to be coy. I'm talking about like religions, a lot of religions. I would assume for the sake of discussion, this is meant to mean if you thought any of that was the case, you now don't think it's the case anymore. You know what I mean? And for a lot of people, I think what they would find is that they would not behave differently if they found that out. They might say, oh, well, where are you going to get your moral temperament if not from religion? But this is just incorrect. Like that just isn't where people's morals come from. Even for people that are religious and say it is where their morals come from, it just isn't for most people. That they're wrong that is where it comes from, in my opinion. They see, it is apparent to them when they go to church, I suppose, that it is good to be nice to your fellow people. You do not need an external reason for it to be good. It is obvious to a sufficiently smart person that it just is correct to be nice to other people most of the time. So I think for a lot of people, this would be defined by how it surprisingly does not change their outlook on life. But I didn't think any of that stuff previously. And for me, I think it would change my outlook on life. For example, here's a kind of outside the box reaction. Does this imply I won't live forever? I was hoping perhaps that I would somehow. It was unlikely to begin with. There's a pretty good chance that I'll die in a nuclear Armageddon sometime in my lifetime. And there's a decent chance that there will soon be technology that could mean I will live forever, but I will miss the cutoff. Like it will be developed slightly after I would need it, and I'll just barely die before it takes off. To elaborate briefly, I think that, for example, getting into a sort of biological, technological revolution, gene and biohacking and stuff, while currently overblown, probably is going to be a major part of our lives within a normal human lifespan. If we don't all die in a nuclear Armageddon, then probably in, 50, I don't know, years, there will be significant changes to the way we live our lives. I will be like 70, 80, at the end of 50 years, probably before that. There will be significant effects on our livelihood and the way we exist because of CRISPR and similar technologies. Something, I don't know exactly, but I can feel the beginning of the thing we had with the technological revolution kind of bubbling up in biology. I don't know a huge amount about this, but I don't know nothing about this, and from dipping my foot in, I just have a loose estimate that perhaps that will happen around my lifetime. Likewise, because no one can really know for sure, I am of course a little bit anxious that I'm neither young nor old when this is starting to happen. There's a real risk that I will just barely miss the cutoff. Already, I was behaving in such a way where if something might make me live a few more years, you probably want to do that. At my age, yeah, let's have the few more years. That seems good, if you can exercise a little more now, have a little more antioxidant now. I don't know. I'm just giving random examples. Not particularly these things. Maybe doing that a little bit more is a good bet. You might just barely be over the line. And then the idea is that if you manage to survive a little bit longer, well, that buys you more and more time for more and more solutions to the ways you'll die. After all, we don't have to disarm just one biological problem to naturally not expire of old age. There are quite a few things we need to get out of the way, and new problems we'll need to solve if we were to live for much longer. New problems, but with new solutions, people who are solving them living longer and therefore able to interface them with more time, with perhaps the ultimate carrot on a stick, the fact that they will die unless they solve them, and they will continue to live if they do. So I think there's a real chance that there will be a sort of positive feedback loop in a way, where people who are interested in living longer and the people coming up with ways to live longer will live longer and thus be able to spend more time on these problems. I also think that it will be pretty interesting to confront people who currently kind of turn and burn their environment, who forsake the well-being of the world in the future for their usually monetary gain now, your oil baron or whatever. Interesting to see how those people may change their tune if confronted with the idea that by default you will not die of old age, and you would have to choose to die of old age. I think most people will not choose to do that, and thus will be trapped in a world that they are currently making worse for themselves. There is no death to get you out of this situation, if you will. But all of that, as you can see, is getting a bit far away from the main topic. It is stuff that came to mind, and I assume that's why you asked me this in part, so I wanted to bring it up. But suffice to say, I would probably not be as interested in these subjects if I knew that I was going to repeat my existence over and over for a long time. This implies that there will be... It adds a sort of impermanence to me. That's how I feel. I know it's weird because it's almost like I'm being told it's going to go on forever. I also personally do not care about the idea that there will be a kind of record of my life. That is kind of beautiful in a way, I acknowledge that. Seeing that the things that I went through will be kind of immortalized in a way nobody will be able to appreciate, as far as I can tell, but I suppose the demon can appreciate it. I would want to know what they thought about my life, I suppose. Do you know what happens to me in the future? Is that a thing that is doable within reason from your perspective, I might ask? But personally, I would be thinking more locally if I was told this. I would be moving on to, I think, the body of discussion, in a way, which is, do we live differently now because it is going to happen to me over and over again how we live in the present? And I think my answer would be yes. I would at least think about that and see if I'm doing that the way I would want to. Now, again, it's tricky, right? Because I am not experiencing these repetitions. I am the contiguous experience of consciousness that I'm experiencing. And as far as I can tell from this wording, we have no comment from the demon on whether that will change on the previous loops. I would infer that it will not change. I will not be aware that this is happening, except when I'm told this at this exact moment in my life. When I am 31, every loop, I will be told that this repetition is happening, which will influence me by the butterfly effect to do the same things differently each time. That's my understanding. Thus, it's not like I will remember the suffering from previous times, remember the enjoyment from previous times, and get to enjoy the things again. For if I did remember, it would change my actions. So I'm assuming it means I won't experience it, which means it doesn't exist. It has no real effect on me. And therefore, it's not entirely clear why I should change any of my thinking or react in any way. It simply doesn't have to do with me. The repetitions are not going to happen to me as I experience myself. They will only be happening to me from the frame of reference of someone outside of the repetitions and who is not me, so the demon, basically. Thus, this doesn't seem to have any implications for anybody but the demon when you look at it a certain way. Although, I have enough of a sentimental streak that I'm still attached to how I will be forcing myself to live for the rest of eternity. And so even though it arguably doesn't have anything to do with me at all, I still would have cause when told this to reevaluate how I am living my life and see if it is something that I would want to repeat ad nauseum. So let's do that, shall we? What is the way that I would want to be repeating my life over and over? Well, I guess the first thing that would come to a lot of people's minds, and certainly to mine, is living in the moment. But I think this is often very short-sighted, literally. The idea that you ought to make the most of today because it'll be gone tomorrow is kind of upended by this idea, don't you think? Because, I mean, we know that today is literally going to not be gone tomorrow. We'll be repeating endlessly. Sure, you could make it a really good day and then repeat it over and over again. But to me, it involves a little bit more introspection. I mean, if you want to take care of your future self, doesn't investing in the future make a little bit more sense? However, again, I think that many people really misuse the idea of long-term planning. The first example would be our culture as a whole. The idea that you ought to invest for retirement and save for the long term, I believe, is being grossly misused into essentially just anxiety procrastinating your plans for your life forever until it's over and not doing anything with your time. Understandable. Everything in your culture is screaming at you to do so. The way our economic system works kind of, in theory, rewards you for behaving that way. You know, gaining interest or setting up a 401k and such for yourself. Your business, your place of work, will certainly encourage you to do such a thing. I do not have anyone providing such benefits. Well, I do, but it's just me. And so it's something I've thought about a lot. I have been more interested historically, as a small business owner, sole proprietor, in creating a business model that will treat me well in the long run, but not necessarily because I'm going to forsake my well-being now, simply because I'm going to make a business that I will be happy to be running in the future, that I will be able to run or make money off of in the future, rather than a business that forsakes my well-being now in exchange for like getting that well-being back in the future. That to me does not seem like profit. You're just reassigning benefits from now into the future, and well, I might die, not to put too much of a point on it. Again, for many people, I think that they're essentially just out of understandable anxiety, not planning for the future, and saying, with some unhealthy encouragement from our society around them, that it's productive, responsible to save for the future, but it is simply too long in the future for which they are planning. If you want me to be more practical, I would say that there is a system to it, and I'll tell you how I would think of that system. The goal, in my mind, is to invest in the future right up until just before the point that your immediate existence becomes actively unpleasant. This may require finding a way to invest in the future that it benefits you enough in the future that your immediate existence doesn't go down to being unpleasant. And then, of course, that also means that you need to make sure the future benefits are directly visible. This is the thing I think a lot of people mess up. They might say they feel fine working at their job, but the future benefits have been pushed so far into the future that they're actually not there, in my humble opinion. After all, if you change enough, you really aren't you anymore in the same way. And so I think that the benefits ought to be appreciable to current you, yet be far in the future. So practically, I think this is like 10 years, like a decade, is a good interval of time where almost everything that a human will realistically achieve, you could achieve in a decade. And if it's been a decade, you've honestly been working on something you want to achieve, and you're not close to achieving it. I mean, if you're having fun, that's really good. It might be that you changed your priorities along the way or learned something new about that goal. That's fine. But if you're not that close to it, I think that is a bad sign for that goal. You are forsaking a tremendous amount of immediate well-being for a very possibly non-existent benefit in the future, a benefit that may not come, that you may realize was miscalibrated. You didn't quite understand the situation, and then when you get there, it's something different, a benefit which you might die before you get. I know I keep saying that, but a decade is a long time, let alone the whole span of people's lives. And I think that for many people, this is an entirely practical way to go about the way they currently live their life. After all, were you to set your mind to it, Could you not save up money in such a way that after a decade of focusing heavily on saving up money for the future, you were more or less set going forward? If you had every second of a decade to do nothing but that, and then the challenge becomes, well, but you also need to make it so you don't dip below things being pleasant in the meantime, that may be very challenging. Yes, it might involve several years of that decade worth of just trying to figure out how to do that. It might be that the ideating stage of doing that would take years, whole years of your life where you work and scheme, essentially. And I know that not everybody wants to do that, but I would assert that it does fairly clearly make you better off to do it. I don't think that there's any real assailable critique of the value proposition there. I think it's just a matter of, and I bet most people would say, well, Zandy, my only problem is I don't think I can do that, or that will happen. Yeah, sure. I mean, that's the risk, of course. I'm not trying to say it's wrong to be worried about that. Just that I think it's plainly reasonable unless you're worried about, this thing over time. Okay, so we have kind of my paradigm of how you would live going forward, having been told this truth by this demon. The idea that since you know things are going to repeat over and over, and after all, this kind of doesn't change your situation anyway, I am suggesting a way of codifying the way you invest in the future, where you make sure that the benefits of your long-term planning remain visible, while your short-term experience remains, above water. You don't dip into it being actively bad to live now. That's pretty subjective, but while keeping the future benefits you're investing in view. Basically, just balancing the two. Nothing that fancy. Not going as far into investing in the future as other people do. My polite suggestion is that many people doing that are doing it out of some anxiety about the future, not because it truly makes sense to invest so completely in an unknown future. And not to resort to debauchery instead of investing in the future, because it's just obviously inefficient. There comes a point where if you go extreme in either direction, it's like many things, it becomes just clearly stupid to behave that way. If you throw caution to the wind and abandon everything about your health right now, today, you'll feel bad tomorrow. So clearly that's not efficient. And investing totally and completely in the future is to likely die within the next few years. Of course, working yourself literally to death. Or die a lot sooner anyway. So of course, balancing it somewhere in the middle is beneficial, but I would think that even people who already think they've balanced that could do with balancing it slightly more in favor of the short term, basically. Not short term, but more short term than they currently are. That is, still thinking about a decade in the future, but not much more than that. I'm not sure that you can do that. If you live a life fully lived, you'll simply change naturally more than you would need to be a different person in a decade. I would argue you do die in a decade. Current you is gone in a decade. If you're living a life worth living. If you're doing absolutely nothing, you might be the same person in a decade, but what was the point of that decade, I guess? And really, this gets at the fundamental nature of existence and why we are even here, which I would describe as, the way I've heard it elegantly put, is to continue, is kind of the point of being a human. This is why earlier I wasn't that hung up on the idea that I'm going to repeat the suffering I went through over and over again. I'm not going to repeat the suffering. An identical but non-contiguous with my conscious experience version of me is going to go through that suffering. I'm not going to experience that again. And I take great solace in that, actually. I don't want to. But in a way, it's kind of beautiful because I went through those moments of suffering either because I was trying to progress as a person or they caused me to progress as a person. Because I am, proud to say, hopefully not bragging too much, that I, moved forward in those moments eventually, or they spurred me to. I am willing to accept that to get the person I am now, which I can't compare to any unknown parallel version of myself, this version of me did need those moments of suffering to get to this point. So if I think that what I've done now is good, I can't just say it's wrong to go through those experiences. I'm not really sure what to say. I would like to think that you can get many of the benefits of being who I am now without all that pain and suffering. I would like to say it's unnecessary, but of course we can't know that, and I've now been told that it's locked in anyway. So, whoops, this perhaps wasn't even my first try. Go figure. And so I'm left to wonder, well, what do I make of the time I have? And I suppose I'll be making the same decision about what to make of the time I have in the future as well. Quick time stop to avoid a leaf blower passing by. So I think the thing that we haven't explored here, putting aside my point about managing the longer term in a more, I think, practical way, thinking in the long term, a decade is a long time, but not in such a long time that you are actually unable to see the benefit of those things paying off. And I think really more to the point, it just isn't about long-term planning why many people behave that way. I believe it is more a fear that they do not know what they would want now, which is understandable, but there's your goal right there. Try to learn what you would like in the medium to long term. That's a really easy goal to have while living alongside your normal life, and then you can readjust later to fulfill those goals once you've figured them out. There's nothing really wrong with this. I think the biggest psychological thing, just to acknowledge it before we move on, at least in people I've met in my personal life that comes up, is that people feel like they ought to be kind of complete. It feels wrong to be trying to learn or discover who you are or what you want when you're 25 or 30, realistically. People feel like that puts them behind, but that is very early in your life. Just because most people are set up doesn't mean it's good to be mostly set up by that time in your life. In fact, I think for a lot of people, you see things like a midlife crisis, which I might reword as people realizing that they stopped advancing for 20 to 30 years and correctly freaking out when that happens, and channeling that in a maybe not always the most healthy way. But I mean, that's understandable if you were to realize that. So I think that the next step, having, acknowledged that, is to delve a little bit into people's maybe more terrestrial or normal understanding of the experience. After all, Nietzsche here has described what I guess they thought people would react to, or what they thought other people would think, quite differently than the situation that I proposed, don't you think? They said, "Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or how well disposed would you have to become to yourself and to life, to crave nothing more fervently than this ultimate eternal confirmation and seal?" But why would it require being well disposed to think this is a good thing? Why would it be good to think that's good? You see what I mean? That's sort of the level below that we can maybe talk about for a little while. I don't fully understand. I mean, I would propose, knowing very little about Nietzsche and this piece, that would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or saying it that way makes me think that Nietzsche is fully aware that that is a naive interpretation of the situation. Nothing bad has been done to you in this moment. So that I don't know if that's true or how they thought of it, but I would assume that there's some awareness of that in there. But then I don't really understand why. I get that it would be surprising to meet someone who thought of this situation as positive, a sort of eternal confirmation and seal. Or you could reinterpret ultimate eternal confirmation and seal as not being positive, but just your life is being kind of validated forever. It's not that it's a good thing, but it's just kind of you endure permanently. I guess the snag for me is that I do not see the desire to have your name be remembered in history, to eternalize yourself in this quite abstract way, in a way that isn't really about you. It's kind of like when people write a book and they think that means that I'll be remembered forever. I am maybe in the minority here. I think that is a quite shallow understanding of ontology or the nature of existence. I do not think that that is a noble or well-disposed desire. I think that is a deeply anxious and surface level desire. Not wrong at all. It's not bad or weird to be anxious. I mean, we all are. To some extent, I worry all the time about this idea that, oh, well, I mean, if I were to die now, I was building up all this stuff and it looked like I was just an idiot the whole time. I think you will all of humanity, you all specifically, probably actually think what I'm doing is a good idea, but people generally will think that the way I live my life made sense and was smart in the long run, but not yet. So if I were to die now, that would be, I guess, disappointing, but not in a way I would appreciate. And like being worried about leaving my mark behind won't make me less anxious about this. You know what I mean? I get where it's coming from to want that form of eternalizing yourself, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. Like it's fallacious. I don't, it's understandable to think that, but it doesn't, if you think about it more, it just doesn't do anything. Like you won't appreciate yourself being immortalized like this. You know, this demon example, the moment the demon tells you this, you know that for, I'm 31 now, so for 31 years of each of my existences, depending on when I die, perhaps a third or a half of each of my existences, I will not know that I've been eternalized through this process. So what gives? You know what I mean? Like it's not even a very complete version of I hope you know what I mean, because I've said that a damn lot of times in this parlay. I don't entirely get that. You know, I don't not understand where Nietzsche might be coming from or what they're gesturing to. I feel like I have at least some explanations of what the words literally mean. I'm just confused by how someone who would propose this ontological question would think that was good or noble, positive, signifying anything. Yeah, it's actually even stronger than that. It doesn't do anything for this to be revealed to you. It has no effect on you as an individual. It's just interesting to think about how we emotional humans might, not very logically, just emotionally change our behavior, you know, because we know this is a thing that might happen. It's a little odd to me that somebody would think it is really of great import that this had happened, if that makes more sense. Again, there's the possibility that this is gesturing at the way Nietzsche would imagine many people would react, not the way Nietzsche would react, necessarily. And this is more of a prompt. It sounds like it's written more like a prompt. So, go figure, it's not a criticism, necessarily. I just thought it was worth temporarily engaging with how other people maybe would see the situation. Does it seem unwise to treat it the way that I am, and why? I mean, indeed, what happens to you as you appreciably experience yourself as a contiguous consciousness if in the future you, not remembering that this is the case, go through all these same events again? Nothing happens to you as a contiguous consciousness because you won't be a contiguous consciousness. So it doesn't seem terribly bad. I mean, there's a simple level of animosity toward the demon, feeling like they inflicted it on you. The old don't shoot the messenger idea. It feels like the demon, the bearer of the bad news, if you see it that way, is in some way responsible for inflicting this repetition on you. But they're like probably not, though. I mean, again, this is going back to the beginning of the parlay. Would I ask the demon about the nature of this information if this happened to me in real life? Yes. Does it have any effect on my existence if we somehow know for sure that this is true? No. And so, I feel like that's not quite enough of an explanation. I'm curious, but that doesn't really change the existential nature of the situation, in my opinion. I mean, it might. I guess the demon might say, well, this person told me and it's changeable. And I would say, okay, well, how about we make a little deal? What do you think about that? So I guess that's something I don't mean to be avoiding engaging with. Would I want this to change if it could change? I mean, yes, but the way that the setup has been presented, it doesn't sound like I can. So I don't want to waste my time changing it. Likewise, I would rather be generally prepared to live a long time than specifically focus on living a long time. Maybe this is a good way to end. I said that I have designs to live for a currently unnaturally long time. If that is at all available in my life, I am absolutely on board. And I think basically all objections to not living a long time are immature, not unmature, but less mature than they will be. Like people will get over those things. They are wrong in some way to feel that way. And people given enough time would agree that there is nothing, it's not good to die, basically. It is mostly used, the way I've heard it put that I like, is as a solution to problems in the future, basically, that you eventually die so you can put things off because you don't have to put them off forever. This is not insane, illogical, but it is ultimately fallacious. Like, you can do better. You could just address those problems. I think many people simply think that a lot of things that ail humanity are not addressable. You can't not be anxious about death. You can't not be anxious about your security in your social life or fulfillment as a human being, but you can feel better about those things, according to me anyway. And I think a lot of people that are worried about living a long time thinking, oh, well, you have to go through all this bad stuff forever, are just incorrectly assuming that you can't solve those problems, but you can, according to me. Or at the very least, it's incredibly extreme to assume that you can't. And to go, oh, well, I will literally die because I just haven't yet thought of a solution to those problems. Like, that's very extreme. I hope you can agree. I mean, come on. Like, is there much harm in trying? I think no. Anyway. But existence can be a bit of a drag. I'm definitely not opposed to that. The idea that I have to, shit forever is not appealing, but I don't think I do have to do that forever. For example, in the future, we might be able to stop having physical bodies. So, I mean, this is an extreme example on purpose to illustrate my point, and because it's sort of funny to imagine. But there isn't really anything inflicted upon us in our existences that isn't removable, or the things that aren't removable are good, in my opinion. Like, again, the idea that there's this pursuit of novelty. You're not going to exhaust novelty, so it doesn't seem bad that probably won't ever be, like, removed. I don't think I'm going to stop wanting new things, but I don't need to stop wanting new things. I had somebody close to me in my life say, I don't want to live forever because I'll get bored. And I just disagree. Like, that's I get why you're saying that. Will you exhaust everything in the world? But I just don't think that's the case. And I especially think that in 2024, it's kind of plainly apparent that it's almost absurd to suggest that now. To be fair to this person, they did say this a good 10 or 15 years ago. But I mean, even then, I think it was fairly obvious that you're not going to exhaust all of even just Earth's offerings, even just nature's stuff to offer, let alone human creations. And like, if we tried to have more stuff, to not exhaust ourselves, that could be had, that could be done. And to me, it is more of an excuse to not engage with those things. But the idea that, the this state of affairs is this way, does it make me upset? Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon? I mean, I guess, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to say that I think it's good, that it's just a good thing. I guess I just feel like if this is the state of affairs, what shall we think of it? And I feel like in practice, a lot of the same philosophies that made sense before just make equally as much sense now. If anything, it reaffirms that it makes sense to live the way it already made sense to live. And it would only be if you were revealed something else, like, hey, by the way, heaven and hell do exist. And so your actions will reflect on your future different than this life. That would be cause to change your actions currently, if you were somehow able to be absolutely sure that that was true. But unable to be absolutely sure that's true, you're probably going to forsake the only time you have for something that doesn't exist. Again, no offense to people who have that religious belief. I'm just explaining what, if you saw it this way, you would think that. If you saw it that way, you would think this. You're welcome to believe what you like. Just from the perspective of discussing, like, let's say we knew what was happening next. I don't think this way of knowing what happens next would be cause to change your actions, or it might prompt you to think about changing your actions, but not in a way that wouldn't have already made sense. It might just be that this happens to be why you think about that. But I don't think your conclusions would sensibly be any different than they would be if you just thought about this before the demon told you this thing about your life, as I obviously have from the way this parlay has gone. You can tell this was one of the ones where I largely already had, knew what I was going to say, not that I didn't learn anything new while discussing it. Yeah, I'm more angry at the demon than I was before I started this parlay, I guess. I can't help but imagine what could be instead. The thing that I'm the most denied, in my opinion, is actually the samsara that I led the parlay with. The idea that there will be repetitions of my life, but they will be able to be different in subtle ways, to sort of grind the edges off of the diamond in the rough that is the human soul. I do not think that this is a terrible fate, necessarily. A lot of Buddhism does, well, identifies it as being a process of suffering, but I want to try to do that within reason. If you're telling me I have the agency to change how I behave, which Buddhism doesn't necessarily tell you, but let's just say, I don't, I mean, that is living as a human being. Like largely repeating these same things, but being allowed to try to progress is to be human. And the idea that the demon tells me I won't know, but it's true, that I will repeat these attempts, thinking that I can change, but I actually can't. I'm not sure what to say. I mean, that could already have been true. It perhaps was already true before you told me this, demon, and I still attempted the changes. So I'm not sure what to say. Like, what am I to do other than continue trying? Knowing that it's in vain isn't that different than assuming it's in vain, which I already did. I don't know. So I'm not sure. Is that well disposed? Is that Nietzsche's well disposed? To find this to be an ultimate eternal confirmation and seal? I mean, it's still not something good that's happening to me, though. I think that's what I have to say. This is one where it's fun to hear what other people think. In a way, this would be an interesting crew parlay because it would be cool to see people weigh in. But you can really go on this topic for quite a while. And I think another thing you saw is that for a good amount of the things that I said during this parlay, it requires a decent amount of further explanation for that statement to be significant. Like to say, invest in the long term a little less, or in the medium term. I think it was useful, important for me to go into some detail, a not insignificant amount of detail, to explain what I meant by that in practice. I don't really mean that people ought to actually do things that different than how they currently are. Just that you could, but more so that just having it in mind that there really isn't further than a decade. I feel like that is the key. This isn't a parlay asking for advice, but if I were to give you a takeaway, if you found the way I described thinking about my existence appealing or compelling or interesting, I do have a takeaway for you, and it is, I don't think you exist anymore, none of us exist anymore, in around a decade if you are living your life actively. You will change enough, the world will change enough that if you invest in something that you get later than that, you basically just don't get it. Or a future version of you might get it, and there's every chance that person will not want the same thing and will not be happy with having spent the time that way. I would say, in my personal experience, thinking back to times that I've done calculations like that myself, it's true that on the edge of a decade, 8-ish years ago, there are some decisions I made then investing in the future that I don't entirely agree with even now. Though I have been changing faster than I might in the future, I was significantly younger 8 years ago, of course. They weren't crazy decisions, but I definitely would have made them a bit differently now, and I'm happy that I did not invest further in the future than that, because I would almost certainly not agree with those value propositions currently. Even now, I want to be wrapping up the projects I have currently, the longest term ones, within a decade. The goal of my series of YouTube channels at the moment is to change the gaming industry in such a way that there are more good build systems, and that games think about build systems, basically. I guess to be more specific, I want it to be commonplace for game designers to think about build systems when they make games. I think it is currently not. They make them a lot, but they don't think about them in a way that leads to more fun very much. Even the best build systems we have, at least in my opinion, frequently thought shockingly little about actually making builds, and it seems like the build system was not a mistake, but like a byproduct, like radiation from the rest of the design ideas, and I want that to change. That is the thing I want to change. I think my philosophy holds largely true here. If I am going to be able to change that, it seems like I would want to see results in a decade. It is the job of a decade. in a decade, I can become a game developer. In a decade, people that I invite to a game jam that I run will be able to become game developers, so minded. In a decade, I could talk to people who currently design build systems with the things I want in mind and see if I can add that to other places in the world. And in a decade, if I'm going to succeed at YouTube, I will have, I think. Now, obviously, it's possible that the exact amount of time it takes won't be literally exactly 10 years. Of course, I hope no one is thinking I mean that. But just to say that once that's done, I mean, I might not agree that this is a good goal to have. I have an ever-changing, incomplete philosophy about what a good build experience even is. So I certainly don't want to embark on a journey so long that by the time I finish it, I don't even agree that it's a good idea. You see what I mean? And in the first place, I don't think a future version of me will think it's bad to have done this thing to the world. I just might think that there's something even better to have done to the world, or with my time. There might be something I enjoy even more, you get the idea. And so it's a good block of time, enough to achieve one of the larger, I think you can agree it would be quite an achievement to feel like I had appreciably nudged the industry in that direction. I don't care about getting credit. As long as I feel like I got to interface with the world in that way, that's more than good enough for me. I don't care about people thinking I'm the one who did it, as long as I get to see the effects I appreciably had. That's fine, more than enough. I might very well fail at doing that, but I don't see myself not succeeding with the current situation. It's a long time, too. But you get the point. I mean, I want to do more things in life. I mean, I think you can agree that that's a high-level goal, pretty large. Many very successful people arguably did less to change the world than that. Although they weren't trying to change the world, they were trying to pursue just their art, and it happened to affect the world in such a way. I'm directly trying to have a societal effect, although I'm well aware that it's often more efficient to not directly try to have the societal effect, and maybe more on that some other time. I have factored that in, I suppose. Anyway, and so, I mean, would I still do that if I was told this? I would. I mean, yeah, why not? I mean, what are we supposed to do with our existences if not that? What's going to generate more fun for me than reshaping the world to have more of what I like in it, and all along the way, basically just playing more of the kind of game that I enjoy? This seems like a pretty efficient beelining of my short and long-term benefits, don't you think? And provided that I make like money from doing that, I will then have a platform on which I can sell, I don't know, for example, merchandise items that we all agree we would like. Maybe some branding that we would all like on a shirt or mug. I would like such things. Would you like such things? I think that could be nice, and it will make a decent amount of money if I were to sell them. I can market games I've made in that time. That's pretty effective. Hey, made a game, you get to have the marketing for free. Only the opportunity cost of not making another video on your channel. Yeah, I mean, that's like, you know, a down payment on a house worth of money saved. Like, that's pretty good. So I think it will be okay. And then banking those benefits, quite literally, I will have done things that make me and hopefully you happy, and be able to move on to something else if I want. Or I'll have learned something about the way I was tackling the thing I did, had a great time along the way, and gained amenities, and continue from there. I don't think that allotting more than a decade for that has any benefits, I guess, is my thinking. So we'll see. Thanks to the parlay. Folks, if you'd like to get a parlay just like this, you can use the link in the description. PistilWhip here was actually gifted this parlay by iPatchNotes, or Asymptomatic, on our Twitch stream, so thank you for gifting that to them. I like these PistilWhip parlay prompts, so I'm happy when you gift them. Looking forward to the next one.